Hi everybody, my name is Noah Harris. I figured that since this is a networking group, having some sort of networking 101 talk may be prudent for the audience. You may learn something, you may not. I've been around the bush a few times and I feel like I have something worth saying, but if you disagree, come fight me afterwards. So, loose outline, I got a story for you. I'm gonna talk about why networking matters to me personally, how you have to remember that when you're networking, it's about the people, and then I have a framework that I like that I've pulled together from a book or two that I find to be very effectual in terms of carrying conversations, and some common mistakes that people make while networking, and then talking about charisma and if you actually need it or not. So we'll start with story time. Let's see, what is it? It's March. It is March now. About 10 years ago, 2016, I am living in Columbia, South Carolina. I am working remote for a company out of California, and I have just moved to the middle of nowhere with my then girlfriend, now wife. Because I worked remote, I figured, why do I need to leave the house? And so I would spend long periods of time at the house, not interacting with other humans besides my wife for exceptionally long periods of time. And by that I mean not just like a day or a week, but like 2 weeks or 3 weeks that I would go not talking to another human. I don't know if you guys knew this, but we're humans. As humans, we are somewhat social creatures. And so I suffered mentally with this, right? Depression in the works. Eventually, after about 8 months of bad habits and sleeping in and not being productive and kind of just falling apart in life, I figured that I should probably do something different. So I started my first job. Well, I started my first startup, correction. And I started to get out networking because it's really hard to do business if you don't know anybody. You got to have somebody to like buy your services or something. So I'm getting out and I'm networking and I go to some events and I start to meet people and I see faces and it's like really awkward at first because I haven't spoken to other humans in a while. And as I'm going to these various events, I start to see the same faces again and again. It's like, oh, I met you over here and I met you over here. Do you do this thing? And you start to kind of build that recognition. Over the course of maybe 3 months, my life had pretty much done a 180 from depressed and overweight to still overweight but less depressed, and it was an uptick. And so it kind of made me realize that when you are suffering, I guess, from like loneliness or depression, at least for me in the terms of, you can come in if you like. Nope. If you're suffering, in my case, from lack of social interaction, networking is a great way to do it, but it is awkward. And so networking is a muscle, like the physical muscles in your body, that will atrophy if you don't use them. I think that all of us experienced over that short 2-week period that was COVID. But when we come out the other side, you first get out and you're like, how do I human? How does this work? And so my goal here is to kind of talk about how to human with other humans. So why does networking matter? And I wish I had my speaker slides, but we're going to be a little bumpy, and that's okay. Basically, it does two things, right? Networking opens doors and opportunities for you, but it also has compounding effects. Now, I want you to take a look at my job history. And things are kind of loose, but there's actually 10 items. We'll pretend there's 10 on the screen. And I want you to see that, I have a laser pointer, from networking. All the ones in gold are direct results of networking in various capacities, whether it's at job fairs, through meetup groups, through just getting out of my house and talking to strangers. It doesn't matter. But the 10th one is actually also highlighted. So it's about 80% of the jobs that I've had are directly from networking. And so when I say it creates opportunities, it, at least in my life, really does. Right? So we talked about it getting most of my jobs, but I've also made a lot of friends. Right? I don't know, raise your hand if you've ever moved to a new city and didn't know anybody. Right? And you get there and it's tough at first. I moved here and literally knew nobody in Buffalo. I knew nobody in Columbia. I knew nobody in Ann Arbor. And you gotta have friends, man, even if it's just one or two. And so networking, I've found, is a great way to meet friends. I mean, networking a lot of times, I guess I'll clarify this, isn't always professional, right? It can be romantic, it can be platonic, it can be professional, but like when I say networking, for me, it's more about just being social. And of course, Code and Coffee itself, this is a byproduct of networking. There's lots of people in this room, and I hope it continues to grow. So this gentleman is Kevin Bacon. If you are unfamiliar with Kevin Bacon, he is an actor. There's an idea of the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. And if you're unfamiliar with this notion, it's the idea that everybody in the world, if I'm not mistaken, is connected to Kevin Bacon by a maximum of 6 degrees. And by that, I mean your friend is Kevin Bacon, which is kind of wild if you think about it. And so if you do a lot of networking, the same kind of effect happens to you, right? You get a broader network reach. The more people you know, the fewer degrees away people in your community are. Buffalo has like a weirdly small degree of separation between any other person, like weird, and it's kind of cool. But the more you get out, the more you talk to people, the more people you meet, the better access you have to people. But not only people, but also projects. For example, my current position came to me not because I applied, but because somebody saw what I was doing and said, hey, do you want to come talk to me about working with me? Sure, that's a great conversation to have in the middle of this awesome tech market we have. But it also builds ecosystem credibility, right? You show up, you don't necessarily even ask for things. You're just like, here's what I do. I work in software and I like to think I'm smart. And you talk to other people in software and you're like, oh, these people are smart. Maybe they think I'm smart. And you go to talk to other people and you can like put your smarts in terms of their problems, in terms of business or marketing or what have you. And you start to like build this whole ecosystem's worth of people know who you are and they respect your capabilities. Even if you haven't necessarily demonstrated work for them, if you can speak competently, it'll go a long way. The human first side of networking though is absolutely critical and we can't forget it. And I'm talking about, it's very easy as engineers, I don't have a cool slide, to think that we are Spock-esque, right? You can turn off that emotional side of your brain and just think in terms of logic. And as fun as that is, and as much as I like to think we are like that, we are inherently emotional creatures as humans. And there's really not much of a way around it. But you start to build this kind of idea of a genuine connection, and we'll get to a definition here in a minute. But the human experience are also about giving grace. If somebody messes up, they say something wrong, you can give them the room. You can help them save face and not get embarrassed in front of the audience in front of you. And just let people have a little bit of room to make mistakes, right? In the world of engineering, if any of you have posted on Stack Overflow, you know how fast you get smacked down. Even if you're kind of right. But in the world of human interaction, away from the keyboard warrior mentality, face-to-face, giving people room to make mistakes is important. You got to show respect for differing opinions, unless you think tabs are better than spaces, but we're not going to go there. And it's important to own your mistakes, right? As much as you help other people forgive yourself as well. Right? If you call somebody the wrong name, if you make a claim that's wrong, you can just own it. You can own the mistake. And that actually, sometimes it might feel like that's giving in or that's a position of weakness, but really if you can own your own mistakes, it's power. So what makes a connection feel genuine? Well, you can kind of ask yourself, would I be willing to interact with this person again? If you have a bad first interaction, and you're like, no, I really don't want to talk to them again, then maybe it's a missed opportunity, but that's how it's kind of a gut check of, is this a genuine start of a connection, right? And then ideally both sides of the party feel like they're able to contribute something. If you have a relationship that's very much one-sided, either I'm sure you all have one or know somebody who has a one-sided relationship, it can be tough. So genuine connections are when all parties have something to bring to the table. And it doesn't have to be like, oh, this guy can help me with my math homework. It can just be, I like this guy because he makes me laugh, or gal. But it's also important that there are some things to avoid in networking. You don't want to ask for a job off the bat. And I say that here because it happens, but in general, asking for something too soon, like, hi, I'm Noah, I do this, can you hire me, it feels very transactional, right? And you fall into this notion of the transaction trap, where you're in a position to only make a deal with somebody. But that's ineffectual in networking environments. There's this idea of me-centric behavior, where the people just talk about themselves the entire time. and maybe I'm talking the whole time up here, but the idea is that you don't want people to just like prattle off their resume because they need the spotlight the whole time and then give you no room to talk, right? It's about the back and forth in terms of building connection, building trust, building understanding. You also don't want to stay silent the whole time. Sometimes it's hard to know what to say if you're in a group, but especially in rooms like this, there are lots of groups that happen when we're being social, and you can just excuse yourself. You don't even need a reason. You just can just say, excuse me, and walk away. I've done it here pretty much every meeting. It's okay. There's no shame in it. So let's talk about a conversation framework. And this is one that I've picked up from Supercommunicators by Charles Duhigg. But effectively, it boils down into 3 steps, which I've actually put a step 0 in front of it, which is the small talk. Small talk is a necessity of life, but what if I told you there was a point to it, right? So I've asked people in this room, are you a Buffalo native? That's one of my go-tos, right? How about the Bills game? Zach can tell you I don't know anything about the Bills. In fact, I schedule Code and Coffee during Bills games.
They're off until September.
Perfect, right? I didn't know that. And then how's the weather, right? We've all asked people these questions, but we don't have to keep it at such a surface level. If you want to build a connection with somebody, you got to move past the weather. So these questions actually have a point, right? They're about identifying identities that people have, right? So if you look at me, there we go. Oh, there's one more. Hey, look at that. So these are my general identities. I've got some more, right? I'm a transplant. I'm not from Buffalo. I was born in Atlanta. I've got a kid. I've got a younger brother. I have parents. I think we all do. I'm an engineer. I'm a leader, teacher, student, and I'm an artist. Now, quick poll of the room. Raise your hand if you also identify with any one of these identities. Now look around. Most people, right? So what I'm saying is that you probably have stuff in common with other people. You use the small talk to identify identities in the people around you because it gives you a frame with which to ask, right? So the next step is asking a thoughtful or a feeling question. And people sometimes get defensive if you be like, if you're getting too like psychological on them. But if you come at it from a perspective of curiosity, it doesn't feel invasive at all, right? You want to ask open-ended questions about how you think or feel. So as a blank, what made you find blank interesting? And the cool thing about questions like these is the answer changes depending on the identity you pick, right? Check this out. As a photographer, what made you find portraiture interesting, right? That's one answer. You get it from an artist perspective. As an engineer, what makes you find photography interesting? Well, then I can talk about optics and optic physics, which is fascinating, by the way. And so you can do these with open-ended questions. From your experiences as an engineer, what about business is difficult, right? As a father, what surprised you about trying to raise a daughter, right? And you can flip these out all day. So when you identify identities in people, pick one, ask a question about thoughts or feeling. If you come at it from genuine curiosity, it's not invasive, and it makes people talk about it. So this combination makes a very long list of questions that are kind of easy to find. It just takes a little bit of practice. The next thing you want to do is you want to make sure you match their energy, right? So if you ask a question to somebody and they get excited, like if you ask me about laser theory, I love lasers. I might get excited about it. And so you can dig into it, right? If you ask me follow-up questions about stuff that I'm excited about, I'm gonna feel that we are having a better connection and that you're listening, right? And the same goes the other way around. If they change the mood, follow them, right? If I tell you about how I was fat and depressed in 2016, the mood can come down. We can get a little somber. You don't need to be pessimistic, but the idea is you want to match their energy so that you can start to build the foundation of a relationship, which is really what networking is all about. And I missed this earlier, but for me, networking and community building are kind of one and the same. So there's a lot of overlap there. You can pretty much use them interchangeably throughout this presentation. So this works again, as I've talked, signaling genuine curiosity. That's kind of the goal, is you want to be curious about people. You want to build psychological safety, right? You want to be able to identify people with which is that English? You can have like conversations that are interesting to you, that matter, and then maybe you can start to pivot into things that make people more like in the friendship territory rather than just the stranger territory. It reveals value symmetry in terms of you're each getting something out of the conversation. Again, whether it's laughs or information or anything in between. And it leads to understanding. So there are some common mistakes that people have in networking. And we'll talk about first impressions at first, right? So the first thing you do, usually, when you meet somebody is you shake hands. When you shake somebody's hand and you get like a limp fish, it's awkward for everybody involved. But you also don't want to like death grip the other person's hand, right? So a medium firm handshake, great. Name tag placement, right? You ever go to an event and you see people with like name tags down here? Who's reading a name tag at your hip, right? So let me tell you why I always wear the name tag on the right side. There's actually a reason for it. When you go to shake somebody's hand, usually you look at their hand so you can actually hit it. You shake the hand, and then as your eyes go up to your face, you follow the idea of leading lines, if anybody here is an art. You follow the leading line of their arm, up their body, across their name tag. Ooh, so you hear the name and then see it spelled to their face, right? This helps you remember their name better, and people like it when you remember their names. So I always wear my name tag on the arm that I shake hands with. Sometimes there's insecurity, right? Where you find people who want to just one-up everybody, who want them to feel like, they want to feel like they're better than those around them. But I think that's kind of ridiculous myself, but it does happen. People trying to win the conversation is in the same vein that in a networking setting or in a social setting, it's not about winning or losing. This isn't a zero-sum game, right? The goal is for everybody to get something out of it. And often it comes from being fear of inadequate or judgment. You know, nobody likes to be judged. Nobody likes to be afraid of a situation, so they react in ways that are maybe non-logical. Spock. So check this out. There's this idea of avoidance versus activation in terms of networking, right? So avoidance is when you stand on the side and you don't participate, versus initiating a conversation. You could be waiting to be invited and standing there quietly, or you could be practicing your social reps. I mean, everybody here came out to be social in some way or another, and some of us are more social than others, and that's okay. But if you already got through the awkwardness of coming here, you might as well take the rest of the rep and practice. This is a big one. I'm gonna come back, blaming introversion, but also moving around the room. There's lots of people here. People tend to clump up in cliques of 2, 3, 4, 5. Move around the room, meet people, again, so you can expand your network. I want to talk for 2 seconds about blaming introversion because as an introvert, I said this earlier, I actually am an introvert. It's easy to have some social anxiety and then blame your anxiety on introversion. But introversion is more the idea of, like when I go home after this, I need to not talk to people for the rest of the day. Like I love this, don't get me wrong, but like I'm totally burnt out for the whole rest of the day when I go home from Code and Coffee. I need to be by myself. I sometimes I'll retreat onto my phone in a quiet corner just so I can not talk to other humans. But don't blame being an introvert for trying to avoid social interaction. And I like this idea of kind of flipping the script, right? So if you feel that you're too nervous to approach people because it feels awkward, whether you're at school or at work, at a bar, here at Code and Coffee, think about it the other way. Right? What if somebody approaches you in a friendly manner? Are you going to completely shut them down, even if you yourself feel awkward? No. Nobody in this room has shut me down for trying to approach them and talk to them. And the reality is people won't, as long as you're genuinely curious and friendly. So you can kind of flip the script in your brain to help convince yourself, if you feel a little bit anxious, that people aren't going to shut you down. It's okay. Rizz, for those of you who do not know, is the cool kid slang for charisma. So, got rizz. And it's really about going from good to great. Charisma doesn't give you a foundation. It just makes it's like the polish or the cherry on top, right? So basic networking is just curiosity and listening, right? You ask those follow-up questions, you're doing active listening, you're engaged. But charisma stems from, you want to make the other person feel like the most interesting person in the whole room. right? You give them your undivided attention, you're listening intently, which I think is the next bullet. There it is. Actively listening, and then coming up with engaging follow-up questions. Like if they're getting excited about what you're talking about, ask more follow-up questions, get them excited. It's okay. One of the things that I post on social media is that we're here to nerd out. Get nerdy. But the important part is authenticity and humility, because nobody likes an arrogant prick, right? Yes. I mean, that's true, right? We've all met arrogant people who can't back it up, and it just comes off poorly. So remember that there are likely other people in the room who are smarter than you at something. There are other people who are not as good at you at something, but everybody at the end of the day is probably on somewhat of an equal footing, even if other people's expertise is not the same as your own. It's not necessary to be charismatic, but it is helpful. And there's a couple advanced things that I'll say as I wrap up. Oh, I'm doing really well on time. As I'll say as I wrap up, which is, if you're in a group of people and there's a couple people standing off to the side, maybe waiting to be invited in, go ahead and invite them. If you're having a conversation, say, hey, person who's standing there, what do you think? Right? Get other people involved. Introduce people to one another. As you start to network, you're going to meet people, and somebody's going to say, hey, do you know anybody who's really good at agentic workflows? And I can be like, let me look around the room and say, you should talk to this person and this person and this person. And then next thing you know, your community is forging better relationships within itself. And this is important. You want to protect your time, because everybody has only so much time in a day. And if you get stuck in a conversation where you are not being helpful nor helping, just go ahead and remove yourself. You can do it politely. You can just walk away too. But again, if you just say, excuse me, and you walk away, nobody's going to be offended. So we'll wrap it up. So essentially what we talked about is that it's a skill. It's a muscle that you have to flex and work out. You want to lead with curiosity. You don't want to lead with transactions. You're not trying to get things out of people except for genuine connection. Our conversation framework is identify identities, asking your thinking and feeling questions, and then match their energy. And I want you to practice that while you're here. It actually is really cool. And practice. I guess I was a little early on that one. But essentially, at the end of the day, you don't need to be extroverted or charismatic. You just need to be curious and present.